South Korean prosecutors investigating former President Yoon Suk-yeol over insurrection charges have demanded the death penalty over his failed attempt to declare martial law in December 2024. The Seoul Central District Court is expected to deliver a verdict next month. President Lee Jae-myung sat down for talks with his Japanese counterpart, Lee-Takaichi, and discussed a range of bilateral issues. He said there was small but meaningful progress on sensitive historical issues and highlighted the importance of trilateral cooperation between South Korea, China, and Japan. As massive protests continue in Iran, the death toll is rising, with at least 2,000 people reportedly killed. U.S. President Donald Trump said help is on its way and urged protesters to take control of state institutions, signaling Washington's open backing of the uprising. Hello and thanks for joining us on Arirang News. We begin today with the latest on former President Yoon Suk-yeol's criminal trial. After months of special investigation and more than a year since the martial law declaration, prosecutors are asking that Yoon be handed down the death penalty. The ruling is set for the 19th of February. Our Kim Do-yeon starts us off.
The special counsel team for former President Yoon Suk-yeol's insurrection charges has demanded the death penalty. In its final sentencing request on late Tuesday night, the special counsel sought the maximum statutory penalty for the charge of being the ringleader of an insurrection. For the charge of leading an insurrection, the statutory penalties are strictly limited to death, life imprisonment, or life imprisonment without forced labor. Prosecutors condemn the actions as an unprecedented destruction of the constitutional order. They argued that while Yoon justified martial law as a purge of anti-state forces, it was the former president himself who truly fit that description. They dismissed his defense that the declaration was merely a warning against the opposition party's legislative dominance. Instead, the prosecution concluded that the objective was to incapacitate the judicial and legislative branches to monopolize power and secure a long-term dictatorship. Emphasizing the severity of the crime, the special counsel stated that members of the public are the true victims of the event. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was charged. Former President Yoon was seen actively consulting with his legal team and reportedly scoffed when the prosecution demanded the death penalty. In the gallery, supporters shouted protests, with some hurling insults at the prosecution team. During his final testimony, which lasted an hour and a half, Yoon fiercely criticized the indictment, labeling it a novel and a delusion lacking common sense. Yoon reiterated that the martial law was a warning bell intended to save the constitutional order from the opposition's tyranny, denying any intent to establish a permanent dictatorship. Heavy sentences were also requested for key officials implicated in the execution of the martial law decree. The special counsel demanded life imprisonment for former Defense Minister Kim Yong-hyun, identifying him as a co-conspirator who virtually controlled the operation alongside Yoon. The court must now weigh the conflicting narratives. The defense claimed that martial law was an act of governance against the special counsel's argument that it was a violent attempt to subvert the Constitution. The Seoul Central District Court is scheduled to deliver its verdict on February 19th. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Over in Japan, President Lee Jae-myung held bilateral talks with Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi on Tuesday. He said there was small but meaningful progress on sensitive historical issues during the summit, which lasted about 90 minutes. Our Blue House correspondent Horyuji, who's traveling with the president, reports on the key takeaways.
The second summit between President Lee Jae-myung and Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi began with what President Lee described as an exceptional welcome.
맞습니다.
벽을 깨가지고 환영해 주시면 저희가 어떨 바를 모르겠습니다.
In a surprise gesture, Prime Minister Takaichi personally received President Lee at his accommodation in Nara. Lee is the first foreign leader to be invited to the prefecture since Takaichi took office last October. Tuesday's summit talks lasted nearly an hour and a half, starting with a restricted session including a small number of aides, followed by an expanded meeting and a joint press briefing. What stood out was what President Lee called a small but meaningful progress on sensitive historical issues, particularly the Chosei coal mine. More than 100 forcibly mobilized Korean laborers and Japanese were killed in a flooding disaster in 1942. Until now, civic groups have led efforts to investigate and recover the victims' remains, but the Japanese government's initial response have been criticized as slow and passive.
82여 년이 지난 작년 8월에서야 유해가 처음으로 발굴된 바가 있습니다. 양국은 동유해의 신원 확인을 위한 DNA 감정을 추진하기로 하고 구체 사항에 대해서는 당국 간 실무적 협의를 진행하기로.
And at a time of heightened tensions between China and Japan following Prime Minister Takaichi's remarks on Taiwan, President Lee emphasized the need for South Korea, China, and Japan to find as much common ground as possible and to continue communication and cooperation. The two leaders also underscored the importance of working together to maintain regional stability.
As the strategic environment surrounding the two countries becomes increasingly complex, the importance of Japan-South Korea cooperation and trilateral coordination with the U.S. continues to grow. We reaffirmed our commitment to closely align on North Korea policy, including the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
But it was their one-on-one after the press briefing that took the spotlight. Appearing in matching blue outfits, Lee and Takaichi took part in an impromptu drum performance of the BTS song Dynamite and Golden from K-pop Demon Hunters. This was a special event prepared by Japan, reflecting Prime Minister Takaichi's longtime passion for heavy metal drumming. President Lee's visit this time has ensured that the back-and-forth leader-level diplomacy between South Korea and Japan will continue under the Takaichi administration. The focus now shifts to how the two countries will build a more future-oriented, stable partnership from here. 송유진, Arirang News, Osaka.
And President Lee Jae-myung began his final day in Japan with a visit to Horyuji Temple, one of Nara Prefecture's most iconic landmarks. And alongside him was Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi. The two leaders toured the temple's western precinct, home to several of the world's oldest surviving wooden structures, and posed for photos in front of its 5-story pagoda. The Blue House says the visit was intended to further strengthen personal rapport between the two leaders. President Lee is currently having lunch with the local Korean community, his last official engagement before returning to Korea. Meanwhile, the North Korean leader's sister, Kim Yo-jong, has issued a sharp warning to South Korea, demanding an official admission and apology over what she calls a serious violation of North Korea's sovereignty. In a statement released on Tuesday, Kim accused Seoul of sending surveillance drones across the border in September 2024, and again on January 4th of this year, calling it an illegal provocation. She said South Korea must openly admit what it did, formally apologize, and take steps to prevent it from happening again, warning that repeated violations would force Seoul to pay a price it cannot handle. Kim also dismissed any prospects for reconciliation, saying what she calls Seoul's hope-filled dreams of repairing inter-Korean relations will never come true, and that the current state of hostility will not change. South Korea's job market in 2025 remained sluggish for a second straight year, with job growth in the 100,000 range. The Ministry of Data and Statistics said on Wednesday that the total number of people employed reached 28.77 million last year, an increase of 193,000 compared to the year before. While this marks a slight rebound from the previous year's lows, it remains well below the peak growth seen in 2022. The manufacturing and construction sectors saw a decline, shedding 73,000 and 125,000 jobs respectively. The generational divide also deepened. While jobs for seniors surged, the core workforce contracted significantly. Employment for those in their 20s plunged by 170,000, and those in their 40s saw a drop of 50,000. The overall employment rate for those aged 15 and older inched up slightly to 62.9%. And South Korea's ICT exports reached a record $264.29 billion in 2025, up 12.4% from the year before. According to the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Resources, exports in December alone also rose 32.4% year-on-year to $30 billion, driven largely by strong demand for semiconductors and storage devices used in global AI data centers. Semiconductors led the growth with a 22.1% increase, with strong gains in exports seen to countries like Taiwan, Vietnam, and India. Despite the increased adoption of OLEDs in IT devices, display exports saw a decline of 9.5% due to falling unit prices and weak demand for LCD panels. December marked a record 11 consecutive months of new all-time highs for exports in the sector. Protests are continuing in Iran, with thousands reported killed as security forces opened fire on demonstrators. As the violence intensifies, the United States is openly backing the protests and urging its citizens to get out. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
With massive anti-government protests taking place in Iran, protesters have been met with deadly force. The U.S.-based human rights activist news agency says it has verified that at least 1,850 protesters were killed over the past 17 days, as well as 135 people linked to the government, 9 bystanders, and 9 children. The news agency added that it was also reviewing reports of another 779 deaths. As unrest spreads, the United States has taken a sharply supportive stance towards the protesters. President Donald Trump on Tuesday urged Iranians to keep demonstrating, saying help is on the way. He also announced that all planned meetings with Iranian officials have been canceled. In one of his strongest messages yet, Trump encouraged protesters to take control of state institutions, signaling open U.S. backing of the uprising. Meanwhile, the U.S. Virtual Embassy in Iran has issued an urgent warning to American citizens, telling them to leave the country immediately. It advises using land crossings into Armenia or Turkey if it is safe to do so. Those unable to leave are advised to remain in secure locations and stock up on essential items including food, water, medication, and other necessities. The embassy warned of violent protests amid heightened security measures by Iranian authorities, calling on its citizens to take immediate precautions. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
K-pop superstars BTS will kick off the group's much-anticipated comeback world tour in April. According to the band's agency Big Hit Music on Wednesday, BTS' first world tour in 4 years will begin with concerts on April 9th, 11th, and 12th at Goyang Sports Complex near Seoul. BTS will then travel across North America, Europe, South America, and Asia, holding a total of 79 shows in 34 cities, which Big Hit Music says is the largest number of performances ever for a single K-pop tour. The group will return to Korea mid-tour in June for concerts in Busan. And BTS are also set to release the band's 5th full-length album on March 20th. One of the world's 4 largest winter festivals has officially kicked off here in South Korea. Recognized as a premier event not just in Asia but globally, the Hwacheon Sancheoneo Festival is back for another season of icy thrills. Our Chung Il-im takes us to the scene.
Hundreds of people stand on a frozen river. They lower their fishing rods through holes in the ice, moving the bait slowly up and down. Eyes fixed on the water below, they wait for the pull. Moments later, mountain trout, known locally as Sancheoneo, is pulled from the ice.
They said in the announcements that you should lower the line slowly and pull it up quickly when you feel a bite. I caught 2 fish. I feel really happy.
This is a scene at the 2026 Hwacheon Sancheoneo Ice Festival, a world-recognized winter festival held in the remote mountains of Hwacheon-gun County, Gangwon-do Province. Here, visitors catch Sancheoneo, a trout species that lives only in clean, cold mountain streams. Families from across the country and around the world have come to try their luck on the ice.
In Malaysia, we don't have this kind of experience, so this is the first time we are coming here to Korea and come to the first time also experiencing winter season. Although it's cold, but it's very fun.
Despite the cold weather, some participants take part in bare-handed fishing, where they plunge into an icy pool. A visitor caught this Sancheoneo with their bare hands just moments ago in the pool behind me. Here in Hwacheon, more than 300,000 square meters of ice have been transformed into a massive playground. Beyond fishing, visitors can enjoy other various winter events, including sledding, ice skating, and bobsleigh rides. To ensure a successful festival, officials say 150 tons of trout were released into the river this year. However, safety remains the top priority.
We conduct inspections of the ice thickness, its strength, and even the water level beneath the floating ice, and determine how many people can safely enter the site based on the results.
Nearly 2 million people have visited this festival over the past 3 years, and more foreign media outlets have dubbed the event one of the 7 winter wonders of the world, drawing tourists eager to experience this unique winter culture firsthand. The excitement continues here in Hwacheon until February 1st. 정혜림, Arirang News, Hwacheon.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. Amid U.S. President Donald Trump's threats to take over Greenland, the territory's prime minister openly rejected U.S. control, saying the Arctic island would choose Denmark over the United States. Speaking in Copenhagen, Greenland Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen said on Tuesday that Greenland faces a geopolitical crisis and would stand with Denmark under NATO rather than become a U.S. territory. Nielsen made the remarks alongside Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen 1 day before Greenlandic and Danish ministers meet U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Washington. Trump first proposed taking Greenland in 2019 and has again argued that the island is vital to U.S. national security, citing fears of Russian or Chinese influence. Danish officials say Greenland is not for sale, but remain open to expanded military cooperation within NATO. Global central bank leaders on Tuesday publicly defended Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell after the Trump administration threatened him with a criminal indictment. 11 central bank chiefs, including the heads of the European Central Bank, Bank of England, and Bank of Canada, signed a joint statement backing Powell and warning that political pressure on central banks risks financial instability. JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon also voiced support for Powell, reiterating the importance of an independent U.S. central bank. This follows Powell's disclosure that the Justice Department subpoenaed the Fed over his congressional testimony on a $2.5 billion headquarters renovation. President Trump on Tuesday again demanded major interest rate cuts, accused Powell of misconduct, and said he would name a successor within weeks. Market expectations remained unchanged, with traders betting inflation will delay rate cuts until at least June. The U.S. Supreme Court on Tuesday signaled it will likely uphold state bans barring transgender girls and women from competing in female school sports. The court's conservative majority indicated the bans do not violate the Constitution or Title IX, the federal law banning sex discrimination in education. The case went to the top court after lower courts had previously sided with transgender athletes in Idaho and West Virginia. A final ruling is expected by early summer. Former President Bill Clinton and his wife, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, on Tuesday refused to testify before a committee investigating Jeffrey Epstein. In a letter to House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer, the Clintons called the Republican-led pro-partisan and said the subpoenas were invalid. Comer said the committee will move to hold both Clintons in contempt, a step that could lead to criminal charges. Republicans say they want answers about Epstein's contacts with Bill Clinton during his presidency. The Clintons deny wrongdoing and say no evidence links them to Epstein's crimes. Chu Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
I hope you dressed warmly to fend off the cold during the morning commute. It was another freezing start to the day. A cold wave advisory has been reissued for many parts of the central areas, and Paju even saw morning temperatures dropping down to below minus 20 degrees Celsius this morning. But the good news is that temperatures will rise later today. Seoul will climb back above freezing this afternoon, and tomorrow will feel much milder with temperatures to hover around seasonal norms or much above the seasonal averages. And this afternoon, Seoul gets up to 2 degrees Celsius. Daegu makes it to 7 degrees under partly sunny skies with decent air quality nationwide. Meanwhile, dry conditions continue across the East Coast and the Gyeongsang-do region with strong winds. Then we'll stay above norms through next Monday. Then the coldest days of the season are expected throughout next week.
That's all we have for today's noon edition of Arirang News. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Stay tuned.